On my 66th birthday, I stood outside in the freezing rain, watching my daughter toast with champagne inside my favorite restaurant. I thought she had simply forgotten me. I was wrong. She had not forgotten. She was celebrating the fact that she had just legally declared me insane. I had no idea that my life as a free man was over until a stranger, a waiter I had never met, walked up to me and whispered 5 words that chilled me to the bone. Those 5 words changed everything. My name is William Sterling. I spent 40 years building skyscrapers that define the skyline of Chicago, yet I could not see the demolition of my own life coming until the wrecking ball hit me. Before I tell you how I lost my millions, my home, and my identity in a single night, and how I fought to get it all back, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. The rain was not just falling. It was stinging my face like icy needles, but I barely felt the cold. All I could feel was the bruising grip of the security guard on my arm as he shoved me away from the entrance of the Golden Oak. This was the restaurant where I had proposed to my late wife, Catherine. This was where we celebrated every milestone. The maitre d' a man I had tipped generously for 2 decades stood behind the glass doors with his arms crossed. He refused to even look me in the eye. Just 15 minutes earlier, I had walked up to the podium, shaking off my umbrella, expecting to be led to table 4, the quiet corner booth by the fireplace. Instead, the manager blocked my path. He did not smile. He looked at me with a mix of pity and fear. "I am sorry, Mr. Sterling," he said, keeping his voice low, so the other diners would not hear. "We cannot seat you. Your reservation was cancelled." I laughed, thinking it was a misunderstanding. I told him to check again. I told him my daughter Vanessa must have made a mistake. That is when he dropped the first bomb. "It was no mistake, sir. Vanessa called us personally. She warned us that you were having another one of your episodes. She said you might become aggressive. For the safety of our guests, I have to ask you to leave." Episodes. Aggressive. The words floated in the air like toxic smoke. I have never raised my voice in public in my life. I am a retired architect, a man of logic and precision. I tried to argue. I tried to reach for my phone to call her, but the security guard was already there. As they pushed me out onto the wet pavement, I turned back to the window. That is when I saw them. Table 4. My table. Vanessa was sitting there. She looked radiant, wearing the diamond earrings I had given her for Christmas. Next to her was her husband, Jared, a man who had never held down a job for more than 6 months. He was laughing, his head thrown back, pouring vintage Dom Perignon into 3 flutes. The third person was not me. It was a man I did not recognize. He was slick, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and he was shaking Jared's hand across the table. They were not looking at the door. They were not looking for me. They were celebrating. I stood there, water dripping from the brim of my hat, feeling a chest pain that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with heartbreak. My own daughter had framed me as a senile, violent old man to a restaurant staff that had known me for years. Why? I took a step toward the door, fueled by a sudden hot rage. I was going to march in there and demand an answer. I was going to make a scene. "Hey, you." The voice came from the side alley near the dumpsters. I spun around. A man in a waiter uniform was standing there holding a black trash bag. He looked rough. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and the weary posture of a man working a double shift. His name tag read Daniel. He dropped the bag into the bin with a loud crash and walked straight toward me. His face was hard. For a second, I thought he was going to threaten me, maybe finish the job the security guard started. He stepped into my personal space, aggressive and imposing. "Get out of here, old man," he said loudly, waving his hand as if shooing away a stray dog. "You are causing a disturbance. Go on, get lost." I was stunned. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but then Daniel leaned in close. His demeanor changed instantly. The hardness in his eyes vanished, replaced by desperate intensity. He grabbed my shoulder, pretending to shove me, but his grip was steadying, not violent. "Listen to me closely," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Do not go back in there. And whatever you do, do not go home." I stared at him, confused. He looked over his shoulder at the restaurant window, then back at me. "I just served their table," Daniel hissed. "That guy with them is not a guest. He is a property developer named Kovac. They are not toasting your birthday. They are toasting the court order. Your daughter just got emergency guardianship over you this afternoon. She told Kovac that you have advanced dementia." I felt the blood drain from my face. Guardianship. It was a legal nuclear weapon. It meant I lost the right to manage my money, my medical decisions, and my freedom. Daniel continued, speaking faster now. "I heard them laughing about it. They said the police are waiting at your house right now. If you go home, they will take you straight to a state facility. They are going to lock you up and medicate you until you cannot speak. They are selling your house, Mr. Sterling." They signed the deal on the appetizers. The world tilted on its axis. My home, the sanctuary I had designed with my own hands, the place where Catherine's paintings still hung on the walls. They were selling it. Tonight. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to stammer. Daniel looked at the window again. Vanessa was raising her glass, a victorious smirk on her lips. "Because I have a little girl," Daniel said, his voice cracking slightly. "And if she ever did this to me, I would want someone to tell me. Now go, run." He shoved me again, harder this time for the benefit of the watching security guard. "Get out of here before I call the cops myself," he shouted. I stumbled back, my mind racing. I turned and walked away, trying to keep my steps steady, trying not to look like the crazy man they claimed I was. I turned the corner and collapsed against the brick wall of a closed bakery. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get my phone out of my pocket. I needed to check. I needed to know if it was true. I opened my banking app. Access denied. Contact administrator. I tried my credit card app. Account frozen. Suspicious activity reported by Guardian. Guardian. The word stared back at me from the glowing screen. It was true. In the eyes of the law, William Sterling no longer existed as a person. I was property. I was a problem to be managed. My assets, the millions I had saved for retirement, the trust fund I set up for my ungrateful daughter, were all under her control now. I had $20 in cash in my wallet. No car. My driver had been dismissed by Vanessa earlier that day. She said she would pick me up. It was all a lie. A trap to get me out of the house so the police could secure it. I stood there in the dark, a wealthy man with nothing but the wet clothes on his back. I could not go to a hotel. My cards were dead. I could not go to my friends. Vanessa had likely poisoned them with the same lies she told the restaurant manager. If I called them, they might call her out of concern, and she would send the white coats to come get me. A pair of headlights swept across the alley. An old rusted sedan pulled up to the curb. The engine sputtered and coughed. The passenger window rolled down with a screeching sound. It was Daniel. He had changed out of his waiter uniform into a faded hoodie. "Get in," he said. I hesitated. I had spent my life teaching my daughter not to get into cars with strangers. But looking at Daniel, I realized he was the only person in this entire city who had told me the truth tonight. I opened the door and climbed in. The car smelled of stale coffee and baby wipes. There was a child car seat in the back. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching the golden oak disappear in the rearview mirror. "Somewhere they won't look," Daniel said, checking his mirrors. "You can crash on my couch. It is not much, but it is better than a psych ward." As we drove through the rain-slicked streets, Daniel told me everything he had overheard. He told me how Vanessa had rehearsed her tears, how Jared had joked about turning my library into a man cave, how they planned to sell my wife's jewelry to pay off Jared's gambling debts. Every word was a dagger. But as the pain washed over me, something else began to rise. A cold, hard clarity. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. They thought the rain would wash me away. They were wrong. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror. The man looking back was not a victim. He was an architect. And if there is one thing an architect knows how to do, it is to spot the structural weakness in a foundation. Vanessa and Jared had built their victory on a lie, and I was going to bring the whole house down on top of them. But first, I had to survive the night. When we arrived at Daniel's apartment complex, it was a shock. The building was in a part of town I had only seen on the news. The elevator was broken. We walked up 4 flights of stairs. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and cigarettes. "This is it," Daniel said, unlocking a door with peeling paint. The apartment was tiny. A studio, a mattress on the floor in one corner, a crib in the other. A small girl was sleeping soundly, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. "That is..." Lily Daniel whispered, a softness entering his face that I had not seen before. "She is my world." I looked around. There was no furniture other than a plastic table and 2 folding chairs. No TV, no rug. This man had nothing, yet he had risked his job to save me. I sat on one of the folding chairs, my wet coat dripping onto the linoleum. Daniel handed me a towel. It was rough and thin, but it was dry. Why, I asked again. "You do not know me. You could have lost your job." Daniel opened the fridge. It was almost empty. He took out 2 beers and handed me one. "My ex-wife is trying to take Lily away," he said, popping the tab. "She claims I am unfit because I am poor. She has a lawyer. I have nothing. I know what it feels like to have someone use the system to crush you. I could not watch them do it to you." I took a sip of the cheap beer. It tasted better than any champagne I had ever drunk. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 fathers betrayed by the people they should have been able to trust. Then I looked at Daniel. "I need a computer," I said. He pointed to a cracked laptop sitting on a stack of books. "It is slow, but it works." I walked over to it. My hands were no longer shaking. I logged into a cloud server that Vanessa did not know existed. It was my private server for architectural blueprints, but it was also where I backed up my personal correspondence. I found it. The email chain. I had synced Jared's phone to my cloud account months ago when he asked me to fix a glitch, and I had never unsynced it. I had ignored his messages out of respect for privacy. That respect was gone now. I scrolled through the messages until I found the one from earlier today. It was from Jared to Kovac. Subject: "The old man is out." The text read, "He is at the restaurant. Police are en route to the house. The doctor has signed the affidavit. We will have full control by morning. Transfer the 8 million to the offshore account as discussed. We are cutting the price by half for a quick sale. 8 million. My estate was worth 15. They were selling my life's work for pennies on the dollar just to get cash fast." I turned the laptop toward Daniel. "They think I am helpless," I said, my voice low and steady. "They think they have cut off my resources. But they forgot one thing." "What is that?" Daniel asked. "I built that house," I said. "I know where the bodies are buried, and I know exactly how to lock them in with them." I looked at the sleeping child. In the corner then, at the man who had saved me. "Daniel," I said, "you need a lawyer for your custody battle, and I need a driver and a spy. If you help me take back my life, I promise you, by the time this is over, you will have the best legal team money can buy." Daniel looked at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He nodded slowly. "What is the plan?" "Mr. Sterling." I leaned back in the folding chair, the plan already forming in my mind like a blueprint. "Tomorrow," I said, I am going to turn myself in. Daniel looked at me like I was crazy. What you just escaped? Exactly. Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. If I run, I am a fugitive. If I go back, I am a victim. I am going to let them take me. I am going to let them think they have won. I am going to enter that house and I am going to record every single thing they do. I looked at the date on the laptop screen. They wanted a crazy old man. I am going to give them a performance they will never forget. The silence in the hallway of the tenement building was heavy, broken only by the sound of a distant argument and the hum of a flickering fluorescent light overhead. Daniel fumbled with his keys, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of our escape. When the door creaked open, I braced myself. I have designed penthouses with heated floors and villas with ocean views, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of where my savior lived. The apartment was a single room, smaller than the walk-in closet in my master bedroom. The air smelled of boiled pasta and damp drywall. There was no real furniture, just a stained mattress on the floor in one corner and a crib pushed against the wall in the other. The windows were sealed shut with duct tape to keep out the draft, and a small space heater buzzed in the center of the room, fighting a losing battle against the November chill. But what struck me most was not the poverty, it was the care. Despite the peeling paint, the room was spotless. A small bookshelf made of cinder blocks and plywood was neatly organized with children's books. A single plastic flower in a jar sat on the windowsill. This was a home built on love, holding itself together by sheer willpower. "Daddy." The voice was a tiny squeak from the crib. Daniel dropped his bag and rushed over, his entire demeanor softening instantly. He scooped up a little girl who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. She had messy curls and sleep-heavy eyes. "I am here, Lilybug," Daniel whispered, burying his face in her neck. "I am right here. Go back to sleep." I stood by the door, dripping water onto the cracked linoleum, feeling like an intruder in a sacred space. I watched as Daniel rocked her, humming a melody I didn't recognize. In that moment, the contrast between my life and his hit me like a physical blow. I lived in a 6-bedroom mansion filled with imported Italian marble and antique mahogany. My daughter Vanessa had grown up with private tutors, horse riding lessons, and cars I bought her for merely passing her exams. Yet in that cold, echoing house, we never hugged. We never spoke without an agenda. Vanessa looked at me and saw a bank account. Daniel looked at this little girl and saw the universe. He settled Lily back down and covered her with a blanket that had seen better days. He turned to me, his face weary but kind. "Sorry about the mess," he said, gesturing to the only chair in the room, a folding metal one. "Make yourself at home. I will make some tea." I sat down, my joints aching. I watched him fill a kettle from the bathroom tap because the kitchen sink was broken. As we waited for the water to boil, I noticed a stack of papers on the small laminate table. They were legal documents. Heavy, terrifying legal documents. I am an architect. I know how to read blueprints, but I also know how to read the structure of a disaster. The header on the top page read, "Petition for full custody." I picked it up. Daniel froze the tea bag hovering over the mug. "She's trying to take her, isn't she?" I asked softly. Daniel slumped against the counter, the fight draining out of him. "My ex-wife," he said, his voice hollow. "She disappeared 2 years ago, got hooked on pills, left Lily in her crib for 2 days before I found her. I have raised my daughter alone ever since. I work double shifts. I do everything right. But now she is back. She has a new boyfriend with money, and she wants to play happy family." He walked over and sat on the edge of the mattress, running a hand through his hair. "She has a shark of a lawyer," Daniel continued. "They are painting me as unstable because of my income. Because I live here. They say I cannot provide a suitable environment. The court date is in 3 weeks. I looked around the room again. It was poor, yes, but unstable, no. This room was a fortress of stability compared to the viper's nest I had just left. "You need a lawyer," I said. "A good one." Daniel laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "I found one who is willing to take the case and destroy their arguments. He says we can win because of her history of abandonment. But he needs a retainer. $20,000. 20,000. The number hung in the air between us. For most of my life, $20,000 was a rounding error. It was the cost of a family vacation to the Swiss Alps. It was the price of the landscaping renovation I did last summer without thinking twice. I had spent more than that on the wine cellar Vanessa was probably raiding right now. But as I sat there in my wet clothes, I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that I could not give him 20 cents. My net worth was over $50 million. I had stocks, bonds, real estate, and offshore holdings. But Vanessa had the keys to all of it. She had frozen me out. I was a king locked out of his own castle, watching a good man drown over a sum of money that I usually carried in my checking account. I felt a surge of shame so powerful it made me nauseous. I was useless. I was the great William Sterling, the man who built the city skyline, and I could not even buy a sandwich for the man who saved my life, let alone save his daughter. I watched Daniel sip his tea, his eyes fixed on the sleeping form of his child. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who was calculating how many meals he could skip to save another $10. I looked down at my hands. They were soft, manicured hands, the hands of a man who signed checks. Daniel's hands were rough, scarred, and stained with work, and yet he was the one offering me shelter. The injustice of it burned in my chest. It wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about my house or my pride. It was about the fact that people like Vanessa and Jared could destroy people like Daniel just because they held the pen that wrote the checks. They thought money was power. They thought they could buy the truth. I looked at the legal papers again. Then I looked at the laptop sitting on the floor. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. He looked up. "I cannot write you a check tonight," I said. "I know that sounds ridiculous coming from a guy in a soaking wet cashmere coat, but it is the truth. My daughter has taken everything for now." Daniel shrugged. "I didn't help you for money, Bill. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. I know," I said. "And that is exactly why we are going to win. Not just for me. For Lily." I stood up and walked over to the window, peeling back a corner of the duct tape to look out at the rain-slicked street below. "You need $20,000, I said, turning back to him. "I am going to get you that money, and I am going to get you the best lawyer in the state. But to do that, I need to stop running. I need to go back into the Shark Tank." Daniel looked confused. "You want to go back to the people who tried to have you committed?" I nodded. "I have a plan," I said, "but I cannot do it alone. I need someone on the outside, someone who is invisible to people like them. People like Vanessa and Jared, they don't see waiters. They don't see janitors. They don't see the people who make their world run. That is their weakness, and that is our weapon." I walked over to the table and placed my hand on the custody papers. "If we pull this off, Daniel, you won't just keep your daughter. You will never have to worry about rent again. But if we fail, I go to a locked ward and you lose everything. Are you in, Daniel?" Looked at me, then at Lily, then back at me. The fear in his eyes hardened into resolve. "Tell me what to do." I sat down at the small table and pulled the laptop toward me. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. "First," I said, "we need to find out exactly which doctor signed my competency evaluation, because tomorrow morning I am going to pay him a visit. Not as William Sterling, the victim, but as William Sterling, the man who is about to ruin his career." As I began to type, the shame I felt earlier evaporated, replaced by a cold architectural precision. I was done being the father who was betrayed. I was now the architect of their destruction. And this shabby little apartment, with its peeling paint and love-filled silence, was going to be my war room. I could not sit still in that small apartment. The silence was suffocating. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the smirk on my daughter's face. I looked at Daniel. He was sitting at the table going over his custody papers with a highlighter. He looked up, sensing my restlessness. "We have to go back," I said. Daniel put the pen down. "Are you crazy, Bill? They are looking for you." "I know," I replied, grabbing my damp coat. "That is exactly why we have to go. I need to see what they are doing to my home. I need to know the enemy's next move before I walk into that trap tomorrow." 10 minutes later, we were in Daniel's rusted sedan, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. We drove in silence. When we turned onto the street of my estate, Daniel killed the headlights. We rolled forward in the dark like a ghost ship approaching a rocky shore. Then I saw it. My house was not dark. It was lit up like a carnival of nightmares. Blue and red lights flashed rhythmically, bouncing off the wet pavement and illuminating the manicured hedges I had planted myself. There were 2 police cruisers parked in the circular driveway, and behind them, ominous and waiting, was an ambulance. "Pull over here," I whispered. We parked 3 houses down, hidden in the shadow of an old oak tree. I rolled down the window a crack. The cold air rushed in, carrying the crackle of police radios. I watched as the front door of my home opened. Vanessa stepped out. She was wrapped in a cashmere shawl, clutching a handkerchief to her face. Even from this distance, I could see the performance. She was trembling. She was leaning against Jared for support. 2 police officers stood in front of her, notebooks in hand, listening intently. I strained my ears to catch the words drifting on the wind. "He is not himself, officer." Vanessa's voice was high-pitched, laced with a panic that sounded terrifyingly real. "He has been talking to people who are not there. He became violent at the restaurant. We are just so worried he might hurt himself or someone else." I gripped the door handle until my knuckles turned white. She was not just lying. She was building a coffin for my reputation. Jared chimed in, nodding solemnly. He ran off into the woods behind the house officer. He was screaming about government conspiracies. "Please, you have to find him. He needs professional help." The officer nodded sympathetically. "We have units patrolling the area, ma'am. If he is out here, we will find him. We have notified all local hospitals to be on the lookout for a John Doe fitting his description." John Doe. The name hit me harder than the freezing rain. In the American medical system, a John Doe is a nobody, a person without a name, a person without rights. If the police found me tonight without my wallet, without my ID, which was locked inside that house, I would be stripped of my identity. They would strap me to a gurney, inject me with sedatives, and label me as an unidentified male with acute psychosis. By the time I woke up, Vanessa would have the power of attorney signed, sealed, and delivered. I would disappear into the system, just another confused old man, drooling in a state-funded bed while my daughter sipped champagne in my living room. "Look at them," Daniel whispered next to me. I looked. The paramedics were unloading a stretcher from the back of the ambulance. They were not preparing for a medical emergency. They were preparing for a capture. I saw the leather restraints dangling from the sides of the gurney. "They brought a cage," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so cold it burned. "They are not looking for a father," Daniel said, his eyes fixed on the scene. "They are hunting an animal." I watched Vanessa wipe a fake tear from her cheek and turn back to the officer. "Thank you," she said. "I just want my daddy safe." The word daddy made my stomach turn. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike on this very driveway. I remembered holding her hand when she got her braces off. I had given her everything, and this was her repayment. She was orchestrating my erasure. I realized then that the daughter I loved was gone. The woman standing on that porch was a stranger. a predator. And predators do not respond to mercy. They only respond to force. I cannot let them find me, I said to Daniel. But I cannot leave either. What do you mean? Daniel asked, his hand hovering over the gear shift ready to bolt. If I run now, I am just delaying the inevitable, I said. I need proof. I need them to say it on tape. I need a judge to hear the lie from her own mouth, not from mine. I looked at the house. The police officers were turning back to their cars. They were fanning out to search the neighborhood. The ambulance crew was leaning against their vehicle, waiting for the catch of the day. But the house itself, the house was still mine. I designed every inch of it. I knew that the library window on the east wing had a faulty latch that I never fixed because I liked the way the breeze came in. I knew that the security system had a blind spot behind the rose garden. Drive around the block, I told Daniel. Drop me off at the service entrance behind the neighbor's fence. Bill, no, Daniel hissed. If they catch me, it is over, I cut him off. But if I don't go in there, it is over anyway. I need my phone. I need my files. And I need to plant the bug you gave me. I turned to look at him. You said you know what it feels like to be crushed by the system. Well, tonight, we are not the victims. Tonight, we are the ghosts in the machine. Daniel looked at the flashing lights, then at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Get in, get the proof, and get out, he said. I will circle the block. If things go south, run for the woods. I will find you. As the police cars pulled away to start their search grid, leaving the driveway empty for a moment, I opened the car door. The rain soaked me instantly, washing away the last of my hesitation. William Sterling, the retired architect, died in that car. The man who stepped out into the darkness was a soldier crossing into enemy territory. I slipped into the shadows of the hedges, moving toward the house that was no longer a home but a crime scene waiting to be solved. They wanted a crazy old man. They were about to get a phantom. We parked behind an abandoned gas station, 3 miles from my estate. The rain was drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof of the rusted sedan. Inside, the only light came from the cracked screen of Daniel's laptop. It was an old machine, sluggish and temperamental, but it was the only weapon I had left. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Vanessa and Jared thought they were smart. They had frozen my bank accounts within an hour of the court order. They had changed the passwords to my personal email and my social media. They wanted to cut off my lines of communication to the outside world. But they made a fatal mistake. They forgot that before I was a retiree, I was the CEO of one of the largest architectural firms in the Midwest. I did not just build houses, I built systems. I bypassed the standard login page. I did not go to the family shared cloud. Instead, I accessed the encrypted server I used for my confidential blueprints. This was a digital vault I had set up years ago to store sensitive project bids. And because I had paid for Jared's phone plan and linked his device to my corporate network for data backup, his digital footprint was automatically synced to this server every 6 hours. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 90%. 95. Complete. A folder named Recent Backups appeared. I clicked on it. What are we looking for? Daniel asked, leaning in from the driver's seat. The motive, I muttered. People do not just declare their fathers insane for fun, Daniel. There is always a reason, and the reason is usually green. I opened Jared's email archive. My eyes scanned the subject lines. Most of them were junk. Betting websites, fantasy football leagues, online poker notifications. My stomach tightened. I knew Jared liked to gamble, but I had no idea of the scale. Then I saw it. An email thread marked with high priority. The sender was Kovac, the man at the restaurant. The subject line read, "The Keystone Acquisition." I opened the thread and began to read. As the words sank in, the coldness in my chest turned into a burning fire. It was a zoning map. An attachment showed the city's new development plan for the next 5 years. My estate, with its sprawling gardens and wooded acres, was right in the center of a red zone labeled Commercial Hub Beta. "My God," I whispered. "What is it?" Daniel asked. I pointed to the screen. "They are not just selling the house, Daniel. They are selling the land. Look at this. The city approved a permit for a new luxury shopping mall last week. My property is the only thing standing in their way. Without my land, the mall cannot be built." I scrolled down to the financial breakdown. Kovac had sent an appraisal. Estimated value of Sterling Estate for commercial development, $15 million. $15 million. That was the real price. That was what my legacy was worth to a developer. But then I read Jared's reply sent 2 days ago. "We cannot wait for the market price," Jared wrote. "We need the liquidity now. We are willing to close the deal for $8 million in cash. But it has to be done this week, before the old man figures out what is happening." Daniel let out a low whistle. "They are underselling you by $7 million," while I clicked on the next tab. It was a spreadsheet labeled debts. The numbers were staggering. Jared and Vanessa were not just living beyond their means. They were drowning. Online casinos, high-stakes poker rooms in Atlantic City, maxed-out credit cards hidden from me. They owed nearly $4 million to creditors who did not send polite letters. They broke kneecaps. It all made sense now. The rush, the emergency guardianship, the desperation. They needed my house to pay off the sharks. I was not a father to them anymore. I was a piggy bank that they needed to smash open to save their own skins. But the worst was yet to come. I found one last email. Subject: housing arrangements. It was from Vanessa to a facility called Sunrise Meadows. I knew the place. It was a state-funded warehouse for the indigent elderly on the other side of the state. It had been cited for health violations 3 times in the last year. The email read, "My father requires a secure unit. He is confused and prone to wandering. We cannot afford a private room at this time. Please process his admission for the Medicaid ward. We will drop him off as soon as the police locate him." I sat back feeling the air leave my lungs. She was selling my $15 million estate to pay her gambling debts, and she was going to dump me in a place that smelled of urine and bleach in a shared room with 3 other strangers paid for by the taxpayers. She was not going to spend a single dime of that $8 million on my care. I looked at the rain streaking the window. I thought about the days I spent teaching Vanessa how to draw. I thought about the nights I stayed up with her when she was sick. I thought about the wedding paid for, the cars, the love. It was all gone. Erased by greed. Daniel looked at me, his face pale. "Bill," he said softly, "I am so sorry." I closed the laptop with a snap. The sound was like a gunshot in the small car. "Do not be sorry," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It was calm. It was the voice of a man who had just finished reviewing a flawed blueprint and decided to tear the building down. "Why aren't you screaming?" Daniel asked. "If I saw that, I would want to kill someone." "Screaming is for victims, Daniel. I am not a victim. I am the owner of that land." I pulled the flash drive out of the laptop and put it in my pocket. "They think they are selling a house," I said, staring into the darkness. "But they forgot that the deed is still in the name of the William Sterling Trust. They need me to be incapacitated to access it. That is why they need the doctor's note. That is why they need the police report." I turned to Daniel. "They want a show. We are going to give them a show, but first I need to print these emails, and then I need to make a phone call to an old friend who hates my daughter almost as much as I do right now." "Who is that?" Daniel asked, starting the engine. "My lawyer," I said. "Patricia Thorne. She has been trying to warn me about Vanessa for years. I never listened. I thought she was just being cynical. Tomorrow morning I am going to walk into her office and tell her she was right. I looked back at the screen one last time before the battery died. Vanessa wanted fast cash. She is going to find out that the only thing she earned tonight is a prison sentence. Drive, Daniel. We have work to do. The neon sign of the abandoned gas station buzzed overhead, casting a flickering green light on the wet pavement. I stood inside the cramped convenience store, the smell of floor cleaner and stale hot dogs filling my nostrils. I placed a $20 bill on the counter and pointed to a cheap plastic prepaid phone hanging behind the glass. The clerk, a teenager with headphones around his neck, barely looked up as he slid the package across the scratched surface. I walked back to Daniel's car, tearing open the plastic packaging, with teeth that were clenched so hard my jaw ached. I inserted the battery. I waited for the screen to light up. This cheap piece of plastic was my lifeline. It was the only secure line I had left to the one person in this city who could wield a gavel as a weapon. Patricia Thorne. She had been my corporate counsel for 20 years. She was a woman who ate sharks for breakfast and didn't bother with the bones. I dialed her private number from memory. It rang once, twice. Thorne, she answered, her voice sharp and alert, despite it being past midnight. Patricia, I said. It is William. There was a pause, a heavy silence that screamed of the chaos I had left behind. William, she exhaled, the professional veneer cracking just enough to reveal relief. Where the hell are you? The police scanners are going crazy. Vanessa has half the precinct looking for a wandering geriatric patient. She is telling everyone you are off your meds and dangerous. I am not off my meds, Patricia, because I am not on any meds. I said, my voice low. And I am not dangerous. Not yet. I told her everything. I told her about the restaurant, the ambush, the waiter who saved me. And I told her about the emails I had found on the encrypted server. I told her about the $15 million land value and the $8 million fire sale. I heard the sound of a pen scratching furiously on paper on the other end of the line. That is motive, William, Patricia said, her voice turning cold and calculating. It is fraud. It is conspiracy. But here is the problem. It is all digital. What do you mean? I asked. I mean that in a competency hearing, Vanessa's lawyer will argue that you authorized these negotiations months ago. They will claim the emails are out of context. They will say your sudden paranoia about the sale is just a symptom of your dementia. William, we are dealing with a guardianship order. The burden of proof has shifted. You are guilty of being insane until proven healthy. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. So the emails are not enough. No, she said. To overturn an emergency order this fast, I need more than spreadsheets. I need malice. I need to prove that she is not acting in your best interest. I need to prove abuse, neglect, or coercion. I need a smoking gun, William. And right now all I have is a missing client and a daughter playing the grieving saint on the 10 o'clock news. I looked through the windshield at Daniel. He was watching me, anxiety etched into the lines of his face. He knew this call was our only hope. I took a deep breath. What if I get you the smoking gun? I asked. How? Patricia asked. You are in hiding. I am going to stop hiding, I said. I am going back. Silence. Then an explosion of protest. Absolutely not, Patricia snapped. That is suicide. If you walk back into that house, you are surrendering your freedom. She will lock you in a room. She will drug you. You won't be able to testify if you are drooling on yourself in a chemically induced stupor. She will try, I said, watching the rain start to fall again. But she won't succeed. Because this time I won't be the father she thinks she can manipulate. I will be a spy. I explained the plan. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It relied on variables I could not control. But as I spoke, I could hear Patricia's legal mind turning, weighing the risks against the potential payoff. "If you do this," Patricia said finally, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you have to commit to the bit. You have to let them think they have won. You have to let her show her true colors. And William, if they catch you recording them, there is nothing I can do to help you." "I understand," I said. "Get the paperwork ready, Patricia. I will bring you the evidence tomorrow." I hung up and tossed the phone onto the dashboard. Daniel jumped. "What did she say?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had nothing yet had given me everything. "She said it is a trap," I said. "And she is right." I turned in my seat to face him fully. "Daniel, take me back to the house." Daniel stared at me as if I had lost my mind for real. "No. No way. We just escaped. You saw the ambulance. You saw the restraints. I have to go back in, Daniel," I said firmly. "The emails are not enough. I need to catch them in the act. I need to record them admitting to the plan. I need to record them mistreating me." "You are going to let them lock you up?" Daniel asked, gripping the steering wheel. "I am going to play the role they wrote for me," I said. "I am going to be the confused, helpless old man. I am going to let my guard down so they drop theirs. When a predator thinks the prey is wounded, they get sloppy. They get arrogant. That is when I will catch them." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small button-sized camera Daniel had used for his own legal battles, the one he had shown me back at the apartment. "You said this transmits to a cloud drive, right?" "Yeah." Daniel nodded slowly. "Audio and video. Battery lasts 12 hours. "Good," I said. "I will wear it. But I need someone on the outside to make sure the signal holds. I need someone to watch the feed. And if they try to move me to a secondary location before morning, I need someone to call Patricia. I am asking you to be my lifeline, Daniel." Daniel looked down at his hands. He was terrified. He was a waiter, a father, not a private investigator. This was way above his pay grade. "Why should I trust you won't get caught?" he asked. "You shouldn't," I admitted. "It is a gamble. But it is the only card we have left to play." I reached out and put a hand on his shoulder. The fabric of his hoodie was cheap and worn. "Listen to me, Daniel. I know you need $20,000 for your lawyer. I know you are scared of losing Lily." Daniel flinched at his daughter's name. "If you drive me back there," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "and if you help me pull this off, I will not just write you a check. I will hire Patricia Thorne to represent you in family court. She is the pit bull of Chicago law. With her on your side, your ex-wife won't just lose. She will be lucky if she gets visitation rights on Christmas." Daniel's eyes widened. He knew Patricia's reputation. Everyone in the city did. "You would do that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I give you my word," I said. "And unlike my daughter, my word still means something." Daniel took a deep breath. He looked out the window at the dark, wet world that had beaten him down for so long. He looked at the dash where a picture of Lily was taped. Then he looked at me. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, sounding less like a dying machine and more like a tank preparing for battle. "Where do I drop you?" he asked. "The service gate," I said. "I know the code." As we pulled back onto the road, the fear in my chest began to settle into a cold, heavy stone. I was voluntarily walking into a prison. I was about to let the people who betrayed me take total control over my body and my life. I would have to endure their insults, their rough handling, and their lies without fighting back. I had to be weak to be strong. I checked the button camera one last time. I pinned it to the underside of my collar, hidden beneath the folds of my wet scarf. "Showtime," I whispered to the rain. We drove through the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness, carrying two fathers who were willing to burn the world down to protect what was theirs. The plan was set. The trap was baited, and I was the bait. The iron gates of my estate loomed before me like the jaws of a beast waiting to snap shut. I stood there in the rain, shivering not from cold, but from the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I saw the flashlights of the police officers sweeping the driveway. I took a deep breath, let my shoulders slump, and forced my eyes to go wide and vacant. I was no longer William Sterling the architect. I was William the confused old man who had lost his way. I stumbled into the light, raising my hands to shield my eyes. "Vanessa." I called out, my voice cracking perfectly. "Vanessa, is that you?" The reaction was instant. Two officers rushed toward me, grabbing my arms firmly. I did not resist. I let them guide me toward the porch where my daughter stood. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and disgust. The relief was because her $8 million paycheck had just walked back onto the property. The disgust was because I was still breathing. "Daddy," she cried out, rushing down the steps. "Oh, thank God. We were so worried." She threw her arms around me. To the police, it looked like a loving embrace. To me, it felt like a python constricting its prey. Her perfume was overpowering, masking the smell of the alcohol she had been drinking earlier. "Where were you?" she whispered in my ear, her voice sharp as a razor. "You ruined my night." I pulled away, looking around with feigned confusion. "I just went for a walk," I mumbled. "I wanted to see the stars. But the clouds are hiding them." Vanessa turned to the officers, a sad smile on her face. "You see, he wanders off. He doesn't know what time it is. Thank you so much, officers. We can take it from here." The police nodded, satisfied they had done their job, and got back into their cruisers. I watched them leave. I watched my last chance for genuine safety drive away. The moment the taillights disappeared around the bend, the performance changed. Vanessa's grip on my arm tightened until her nails dug into my flesh. She dragged me into the foyer. Jared was waiting there. He didn't look relieved. He looked annoyed. "Close the door," Vanessa snapped. The heavy oak door slammed shut, sealing me inside. The warmth of the house hit me, but it didn't thaw the ice in my veins. "Give me your phone," Vanessa demanded, holding out her hand. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cheap burner phone I had bought at the gas station. I handed it to her with a trembling hand. She sneered at it. "What is this piece of junk? Where is your iPhone? I lost it," I stammered. "I bought this one. I needed to call. I don't remember who I needed to call." She threw the phone onto the marble floor. It shattered. "You are not calling anyone," she said. "You are going to your room." She did not lead me up the grand staircase to my master suite. She steered me toward the back of the house, past the kitchen, to the small, cramped hallway that led to the old servants' quarters. "Not the master bedroom?" I asked, letting a hint of fear enter my voice. "The stairs are too dangerous for you," Jared said, stepping forward. He was holding a glass of water and 2 blue pills. "We cannot have you falling down." They opened the door to the maid's room. It was a windowless box that we used for storage. There was a single twin bed pushed against the wall, smelling of dust. Old boxes of holiday decorations were stacked in the corner. "This is where you stay now," Vanessa said, "until we find a place that can handle your condition." Jared held out the pills. "Take these," he ordered. "It will help you sleep." I looked at the pills. I knew what they were. Powerful sedatives. If I took them, I would be out for 12 hours. I would be useless. I reached out and took them. I put them in my mouth. I took a sip of water. I made a show of swallowing, bobbing my Adam's apple. "Good," Jared said. They walked out. I heard the lock click from the outside. The moment they were gone, I spat the pills into my hand. I shoved them deep into the soil of a potted plant in the corner. I was not going to sleep. I was going to work. I sat on the edge of the bed and touched my collar. "Daniel," I whispered. "Are you getting this?" I waited. There was no way for him to answer, but I saw the tiny red light on the back of the button blink once. He was there. He was watching. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological torture. They wanted to break me. They wanted to make me feel small, helpless, and insane so that when the time came, I would sign anything just to make it stop. They cut my food. In the morning, I got a piece of dry toast and lukewarm coffee. For dinner, a bowl of canned soup. I lost 5 pounds in 3 days. The hunger was a constant gnawing ache in my stomach, but it sharpened my mind. It reminded me of why I was doing this. Every few hours, Jared would come in. He wasn't bringing food. He was bringing paperwork. "Dad," he would say, putting on a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We found some old documents that need updating. Just standard stuff. Insurance forms. Tax filings. We need your signature here, here, and here." I looked at the papers. They were not tax filings. They were transfers of deed. They were liquidation authorizations for my stock portfolio. They were giving him power of attorney over my offshore accounts. I took the pen. My hand shook. I looked at Jared. "I don't have my glasses," I said. "I cannot read the fine print." "You don't need to read it, Bill." Jared said, his impatience leaking through. "It is just for your benefit. Sign it." I signed. But I did not sign William Sterling. I signed William Sterling. A tiny imperceptible difference. An N instead of an M. To the naked eye, it looked perfect. But in a court of law, under the scrutiny of a handwriting expert, it was a forgery. It was invalid. I signed my name wrong on every single page. Hundreds of millions of dollars of assets all transferred with a fake signature. "Good," Jared said, snatching the papers away. "See?" That was not so hard. He left whistling. He thought he was rich. I sat back on the hard mattress and smiled at the ceiling. By the third night, the isolation was starting to weigh on me. I had not seen the sun. I had not spoken to anyone who didn't want to harm me. I began to talk to the camera to Daniel just to keep myself sane. "They are getting confident, Daniel," I whispered into my collar. "They left the door unlocked for 10 minutes today while the maid was vacuuming. They think I am too weak to run. They are right. I am not running. I am waiting." On the 4th morning, the endgame began. I heard voices in the hallway. Not just Vanessa and Jared. A third voice. Deep, authoritative, and unfamiliar. "Dr. Eris is here," Vanessa said outside my door. "Remember, doctor, he is very agitated. He hallucinates. He thinks people are stealing from him." I sat up. This was it. This was the moment Patricia had told me about. They needed a medical professional to certify that I was in immediate danger to myself, so they could bypass the waiting period for the state facility. The door opened. A man in a tailored suit walked in. He did not look like a doctor who cared about patients. He looked like a doctor who cared about golf club memberships. He held a clipboard, but he barely looked at it. "Mr. Sterling," he said, peering at me over his spectacles. "I am Dr. Eris. Your daughter tells me you have been having a rough week." I looked at Vanessa standing behind him. She had her arms crossed, watching me with a predator's gaze. She expected me to be cowed. She expected me to be the broken old man she had created over the last few days. I decided to give her exactly what she wanted, and then I would give her something she didn't expect. I stood up, knocking over the chair. I let my eyes go wide and wild. I started to tremble. "Who are you?" I shouted, backing into the corner. "You are one of them. You are with the aliens." Vanessa blinked. She hadn't expected aliens, but she recovered quickly. "See," she said to the doctor. "He does this all the time. He thinks everyone is an alien." I grabbed a pillow and held it in front of me like a shield. "Stay back," I screamed, letting spittle fly from my mouth. "I know what you did with the radio waves. I know you are stealing my thoughts." Dr. Aris didn't even step forward to check my pulse. He didn't ask me a single medical question. He didn't check my pupils. He just sighed and clicked his pen. "Clear case of advanced paranoid schizophrenia with dementia," he muttered, scribbling on his clipboard. "He is a danger to the household. I am authorizing an immediate 5150 hold. We will transfer him to Sunrise Meadows this afternoon." This was the smoking gun. A diagnosis without an exam. A commitment order based on 30 seconds of acting. And it was all being recorded in high definition by the button on my collar. But I wasn't done. I needed them to admit the money. I needed the connection. "Wait," I yelled, dropping the pillow. "I will give you the money. I will give you the 15 million. Just don't let them take me." The room went silent. Dr. Aris froze. He looked at Vanessa. 15 million, he asked. Vanessa stepped forward quickly, her face pale. "He is raving," she said, her voice tight. "He thinks he has millions. He is broke, doctor. That is why we have to send him to the state facility." "No," I screamed, pointing at Jared. "You said 8 million. You said you were selling the land to Kovac for 8 million to pay your gambling debts." Jared turned red. "Shut up, old man." Dr. Aris looked between them. He wasn't stupid. He was corrupt, but he wasn't deaf. He heard the numbers. I need to make a call," Dr. Aris said, stepping back toward the door. "This is a complex case." No, Vanessa blocked his path. "You sign those papers now, Aris. We had a deal. 5,000 cash, remember? You sign the papers, we get the house, you get your fee." There it was. The confession. Dr. Aris hesitated. He looked at me, looking crazy in the corner. He looked at Vanessa, looking desperate. Greed won. "Fine," he said. He signed the paper with a flourish. "Get him ready," he said, handing the clipboard to Vanessa. "The transport van will be here in an hour." They left the room. The lock clicked shut. I stood there panting, my heart hammering against my ribs. I dropped the crazy act instantly. I walked over to the mirror hanging on the back of the door. I looked at myself. I looked terrible. Unshaven, gaunt, wild-eyed. But I smiled. I touched the button on my collar. "Daniel," I whispered, "tell Patricia to meet us at the courthouse, and tell her to bring the police." I sat down on the bed to wait for the van. They thought they were sending me to a prison. They didn't realize they were shipping the evidence directly to the courtroom. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 4 days, I felt peace. The trap was sprung. Now all I had to do was watch it snap. The hunger in my belly was real, but the hunger for justice was sharper. It had been 24 hours since Dr. Aris signed my death warrant, and I was still locked in the maid's room. I knew my time was running out. The transport van from Sunrise Meadows was scheduled to arrive in the late afternoon. I needed one final piece of evidence. I needed them to say the number. I needed a jury to hear in high definition exactly how much my life was worth to them. I banged on the door until Jared opened it. He looked disheveled, holding a half-eaten sandwich. The smell of roast beef wafted into my cell, making my stomach cramp. "I need food," I rasped, leaning against the doorframe. "You cannot starve me. If I die before the transfer, you have a body to explain." Jared rolled his eyes. "We are not starving you. We are just managing your diet." I pointed a shaking finger at his sandwich. "I want meat," I said, "and fresh fruit. If you don't feed me, I will scream until the neighbors call the police again." "Do you want them coming back?" Jared hesitated. He knew I was right. A screaming, emaciated old man was a liability. "Fine," he spat. "I will order a pizza." "No," I said quickly. "Pizza is too expensive. You are trying to save money, right? Use the Grocery Dash app. They have a promotion today. 50% off delivery. I saw it on the TV before you took the remote." I saw the greed flicker in his eyes. Even with millions potentially coming his way, Jared was cheap. He pulled out his phone. "What is the code?" he asked. "Save 50, I lied. But I knew who would be watching the order queue. I sat back on the bed and waited. 40 minutes. That was how long it took for a driver to get from downtown to the estate. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. If they recognized him, it was over. The doorbell rang. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard Vanessa's heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Delivery, a voice called out. It was muffled, but I knew that cadence. It was Daniel. I heard the front door open. "Just leave it on the step," Vanessa said dismissively. "I have to verify the ID for the alcohol, ma'am," Daniel said. His voice was calm, professional. "And I need a signature. Company policy for orders over $50. Vanessa sighed loudly. "Ugh, fine." "Jared?" "Come sign for this," I heard Jared grumbling as he walked to the foyer. This was my chance. I started coughing. A loud hacking cough that sounded like my lungs were collapsing. I threw myself against the door, making it rattle in its frame. "Help!" I screamed. "I cannot breathe." Water silence in the foyer. Then Vanessa's voice, sharp and panicked. "Watch him," she told the delivery guy. "Don't let him inside. Jared, check on the old man." I heard footsteps running toward me. The lock turned. Jared burst in, looking furious. "Shut up," he hissed. "What is wrong with you? I need water." I gasped, collapsing onto the floor. While Jared was distracted with me, I looked through the open door toward the foyer. Vanessa was standing there, looking at her phone, ignoring the delivery guy. Daniel stepped inside just a foot over the threshold. He placed the grocery bags on the floor. He caught my eye. He didn't wave. He simply dropped a pack of gum on top of the bags. It was a bright red pack. "Your receipt is in the bag, ma'am," Daniel said, loud enough for me to hear. "Have a nice day." He turned and left. The heavy door closed. Jared kicked my leg. "Get up. You are fine." He went to the foyer and came back with the bags. He threw a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter on my bed. "Here." "Feast," he sneered. As he turned to leave, I called out. "Can I have the gum?" I asked. "My mouth. It tastes like metal." Jared looked at the red pack on top of the bag. He shrugged and tossed it to me. "Choke on it," he said. The door slammed. The lock clicked. I tore open the foil wrapper of the gum. Inside, nestled between the sticks of spearmint, was a tiny black device. It was smaller than my thumb. A high-fidelity spy recorder with a wide-angle lens disguised as a lapel pin. I wasted no time. I attached it to the buttonhole of my cardigan. I checked the battery. Full. Now I needed to get into the living room. I needed to get them on stage. I waited until I heard the clinking of glasses. It was barely noon, but they were already celebrating. I used the bobby pin I had stolen from the bathroom rug 2 days ago. The lock on the maid's room was old and simple. I had designed high-security vaults. Picking a bedroom lock was child's play. I opened the door silently. I crept down the hallway, my socks sliding on the polished wood. The voices grew louder. "Paris first," Vanessa was saying. "Then maybe the Maldives. I deserve a vacation after this week." I stopped just outside the archway of the living room. I adjusted my cardigan. I pressed the record button. I stepped into the light. They didn't see me at first. They were sitting on the white leather sofa, a bottle of my best scotch between them. Jared had his feet up on the coffee table. $8 million, Jared said, holding his glass up to the light. I still think we could have squeezed Kovac for 10. Vanessa laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. Don't be greedy, babe. 8 million is plenty. Besides, the quick sale was the only way to get the cash before the old man croaks. I stood there, the camera lens perfectly positioned to capture both of their faces. So I am worth 8 million, I asked. They both jumped. Jared spilled his drink. Vanessa spun around, her eyes widening. How did you get out? She screeched. I walked further into the room. I did not look crazy anymore. I looked tired, yes, but I stood tall. You are selling my land for 8 million, I said, keeping my voice level. And you are sending me to Sunrise Meadows to die. Vanessa stood up. She walked toward me, her face twisting into a mask of pure malice. She didn't call for Jared to grab me. She felt safe. She thought I was powerless. You were listening, she sneered. Good. I want you to know. She leaned in close, right into the frame of the camera. You are a burden, Dad. You have been a burden since Mom died. You rattle around this big house like a ghost. We are just doing what needs to be done. She took a sip of her scotch, smiling over the rim of the glass. And honestly, the sooner you die in that facility, the better. It will save us the monthly fees. The 8 million is ours, old man. You are just the obstacle we had to remove to get to it. I looked at Jared. And you, I asked. You agree with this, Jared laughed. He picked up a grape from the fruit bowl and threw it at me. It bounced off my chest. I agree that you should have retired 10 years ago, Bill. Thanks for the donation. I looked at them, my daughter, my son-in-law, the people I had loved, the people I had trusted. There was no remorse, no hesitation, just the cold, hard math of greed. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't for me. It was for the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. She was dead. The woman in front of me was a stranger. I understand, I said softly. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Stop with the drama. Jared, lock him back up. The van will be here in 20 minutes. Jared stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. Let's go, Bill. Back to the hole. He grabbed my arm roughly and shoved me toward the hallway. I didn't resist. I didn't fight back. I didn't need to. I had the recording. I walked back to my cell, the weight of the tiny device on my chest feeling heavier than lead. But it was a good weight. It was the weight of the truth. I sat on the bed and waited for the sound of the siren. Let them come. Let them take me. I was ready to go to war. The courtroom was colder than the cell I had just left. It was a sterile, windowless box designed to strip a man of his dignity before the trial even began. I sat at the defense table wearing a wrinkled hospital gown that they had forced me into before the transport van left the estate. My hair was uncombed. My face was covered in a gray stubble. I looked exactly like what they wanted me to be. A broken, confused, senile old man who had lost his grip on reality. But under the thin fabric of that gown pinned to the undershirt, I had refused to take off the tiny black button, was still blinking. It was warm against my skin, a silent heartbeat of truth in a room full of lies. I looked across the aisle. The contrast was sickening. Vanessa sat there, the picture of elegant sorrow. She was wearing a modest navy blue dress, high-necked and respectable. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing at eyes that I knew were perfectly dry. Jared sat next to her wearing one of my ties. He had his hand on her shoulder, playing the role of the supportive son-in-law to perfection. They looked like a couple who had been forced to make a heartbreaking decision. They looked like victims. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Harrison, looked over her glasses at me. She saw a man who was staring at the table, shoulders slumped. She did not see the architect who was memorizing the structural flaws in their argument. She saw a case number. We are here for an emergency hearing regarding the guardianship of Mr. William Sterling. Judge Harrison said, her voice echoing in the silence. "Petitioner, you may proceed." Vanessa's lawyer stood up. He was a man I had paid for. I recognized the suit. I had bought it for him 3 years ago when I put him on a retainer for the family business. Now he was using my money to bury me. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "This is a tragedy. Mr. Sterling has been deteriorating for months, but as the police report and medical affidavits show, his condition has now become critical. He is violent. He is paranoid. He believes aliens are stealing his thoughts. He believes his own children are trying to kill him." I sat perfectly still. I did not look up. I did not protest. I let the words wash over me like sewage. Vanessa took the stand. She swore to tell the truth, her hand resting on a Bible. The audacity of it almost made me smile. "Ms. Sterling," the lawyer asked, "tell the court what happened yesterday." Vanessa took a shaky breath. She looked at the judge, her eyes wide and pleading. "It was awful." "Your Honor," she whispered, "we tried to make him comfortable. We hired a private nurse, but he attacked my husband. He started screaming about millions of dollars that do not exist. He thinks he owns the city. He tried to run away into the storm." She paused to wipe a non-existent tear. "We just want him safe. That is all we want. We found a facility, Sunrise Meadows, that specializes in severe cases, but we cannot get him the help he needs without full legal control. He refuses treatment. He refuses to eat." I listened to her weave the narrative. It was a masterpiece of fiction. She took every act of my resistance and painted it as a symptom of my madness. My hunger strike became refusal to eat. My escape attempt became wandering. My accusations of theft became delusions of grandeur. Then came the financial dagger. And regarding the estate, the judge asked. Vanessa nodded solemnly. "We are asking for the power to liquidate the property immediately, Your Honor. Not because we want to, but because we have to. My father, he has no liquid assets left. He squandered his savings on these delusions. We need to sell the house to pay for his long-term care at the facility. It is the only way to ensure he is looked after." I dug my fingernails into my palms. The lie was so big, so bold. They were selling a $15 million estate to pay for a Medicaid bed that cost the state pennies. They were going to pocket every single dime. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Sterling, do you have counsel present?" I remained silent. I stared at the wood grain of the table. I let my mouth hang open slightly. "The record will show the respondent is non-responsive," the judge said, making a note. Then came the executioner. "I call Dr. Aris to the stand," the lawyer announced. Dr. Aris walked in. He looked refreshed, confident. He carried a thick file under his arm. He sat in the witness box and adjusted his tie. "Dr. Aris, you examined Mr. Sterling yesterday." "I did," Aris said, his voice projecting authority. "And what was your diagnosis?" "Advanced dementia, with acute paranoid schizophrenia." Aris stated without a shred of hesitation. "Mr. Sterling is completely detached from reality. His cognitive functions have collapsed. He is unable to make decisions regarding his health, his finances, or his safety. In my professional opinion, he requires immediate, secure institutionalization. If he is left to his own devices, he will die." He handed the judge the papers, the fake charts, the fake history. The judge flipped through them. She frowned. She looked at me again. This time there was pity in her eyes. It was the pity one feels for a wounded animal that needs to be put down. "This is very thorough, doctor," the judge said, "and very disturbing." She looked at Vanessa. "I understand your urgency, Ms. Sterling. It seems clear that your father is in a crisis." Vanessa nodded, burying her face in her hands to hide the smirk I knew was there. "Please, Your Honor," she sobbed. "I just want my daddy to be safe." The judge closed the file. She picked up her gavel. The sound of wood scraping against wood was the only sound in the room. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented by the family and the medical professional, and noting the respondent's inability to participate in his own defense, I am prepared to rule. She took a breath. I find that William Sterling is incapacitated. I am granting the petition for permanent guardianship to his daughter Vanessa Sterling. I am also granting the emergency motion to liquidate assets for the benefit of the ward. She raised the gavel high. Vanessa looked up. She didn't look at me. She looked at Jared. They locked eyes. It was a look of pure, unadulterated victory. They had done it. They had won. The ink was about to dry on the check. The gavel began to descend. It moved in slow motion. I watched it coming down a wooden hammer that would smash my life into dust. I did not move. I did not speak. I simply counted to 3 in my head. 1, 2, 3. The double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a sound like a thunderclap. The heavy wood slammed against the walls, causing the entire room to jump. The judge froze her gavel, hovering inches from the block. Vanessa spun around in her chair. Jared stood up, startled. I did not turn around. I didn't need to. I knew that sound. It was the sound of the cavalry. Objection, a voice rang out. It was a female voice, sharp, clear, and commanding. It was a voice that had terrified corporate boardrooms for 2 decades. Your Honor, put down that gavel unless you want to be an accessory to a felony. I slowly lifted my head. I sat up straight. I reached up and smoothed back my messy hair. The confused old man evaporated in an instant. I turned to look at my daughter. The blood was draining from her face faster than champagne from a bottle. Hello, Vanessa, I said, my voice strong and steady. Did you forget to check the guest list? Standing in the doorway was Patricia Thorne. She was wearing a red power suit that looked like armor, and she was not alone. Behind her stood Daniel, looking terrified but determined, and behind him were 2 state troopers. But the most dangerous thing in the room wasn't the police. It was the laptop Patricia was holding under her arm. I suggest you sit down, I said to Vanessa, who was now trembling for real. The show is just beginning. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The echo of the double doors slamming against the walls still hung in the air. All eyes were fixed on the woman in the red suit striding down the center aisle. Patricia Thorne did not walk like a lawyer. She walked like an executioner who had arrived 5 minutes early. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a diamond blade. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe you were about to sign a death warrant based on perjury fraud and a very expensive performance by the plaintiff. Vanessa was the first to find her voice. She stood up, her face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. Who is this woman? She shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. Get her out of here. This is a closed hearing. My father is sick. He cannot be subjected to this stress. Judge Harrison lowered her gavel slowly. She looked at Patricia, then at the 2 state troopers standing guard at the door. Ms. Thorne, the judge said, her voice icy. You have 10 seconds to explain why you just stormed into my courtroom with the police, or I will have you held in contempt. Patricia didn't flinch. She placed the laptop she was carrying onto the defense table right in front of me. I am here representing William Sterling, Your Honor, and I am here to prove that the man sitting before you is not incapacitated. He is the victim of a conspiracy. Vanessa's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is absurd. We have a medical diagnosis from a board-certified psychiatrist. Mr. Sterling is catatonic. Look at him. He hasn't spoken a word all morning. Patricia smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Then perhaps we should let him speak now. She turned to me. She didn't help me up. She didn't coddle me. She simply nodded. Mr. Sterling, she said, the floor is yours. I took a deep breath. I felt the button camera on my chest, the weight of the last 4 days, the hunger, the humiliation. I let it all fuel me. I placed my hands flat on the table. I pushed myself up. I did not tremble. I did not hunch my shoulders. I stood to my full height, 6 feet 2 inches of architectural spine. I reached up and smoothed back my hair. I looked directly at Judge Harrison. My eyes, which had been dull and vacant moments ago, were now clear and sharp. "Your Honor," I said. My voice was strong. It filled the room, bouncing off the mahogany paneling. The gasp from the gallery was audible. Vanessa grabbed Jared's arm, her fingernails digging into his suit jacket. Dr. Aris dropped his pen. "I apologize for my appearance," I continued, brushing a speck of dust from my hospital gown. "And I apologize for the deception. But it was the only way to survive." The judge stared at me, stunned. "Mr. Sterling," she said, You seem lucid." "I am perfectly lucid." "Your Honor," I replied, "I do not have dementia. I do not have schizophrenia. And I certainly do not believe in aliens." I turned to look at Vanessa. She was staring at me with a look of pure horror. It wasn't the look of a daughter concerned for her father. It was the look of a gambler who realizes the dice are loaded against her. "What I have, Your Honor, is a broken heart. Because I am not losing my mind. I am losing my faith in my daughter." "Lies," Vanessa screamed. "She was losing control. He is faking it. He is having a moment of clarity." "It happens." "Dr. Aris, tell them." I looked at Dr. Aris. He was sweating now. He was looking at the exit sign. "Yes, let's hear from the good doctor," I said. Patricia opened the laptop. She connected it to the courtroom's main display system. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "the plaintiff claims my client is paranoid. She claims he imagines people are plotting against him. We would like to submit Exhibit A, a video recording taken 24 hours ago inside the Sterling estate." Vanessa froze. "Video," she whispered. Patricia hit the spacebar. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The image was grainy, taken from the low angle of my button camera, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed the interior of the maid's room. It showed Dr. Aris standing there holding his clipboard. It showed Vanessa blocking the door. The audio filled the courtroom. No, Vanessa's voice rang out. "You sign those papers now, Aris. We had a deal. 5,000 cash, remember? You sign the papers, we get the house, you get your fee." Then Dr. Aris's voice. "Fine. Get him ready. The transport van will be here in an hour." The courtroom erupted. Dr. Aris stood up, knocking his chair over. That is doctored. It is a deepfake. I never said that. Sit down." Judge Harrison roared, banging her gavel so hard I thought the handle would snap. She looked at the doctor with eyes that promised prison time. "Bailiff, secure the witness. Nobody leaves this room." Patricia wasn't done. "We have more, Your Honor. The plaintiff claims Mr. Sterling is dangerous and needs to be sedated for his own safety." She clicked on a file labeled Toxicology. "This is a report from an independent lab, time-stamped 2 hours ago. My associate, Mr. Daniel Miller, recovered a sample of the pills Mr. Sterling was forced to take. He also recovered a saliva sample from Mr. Sterling before he entered the courtroom." Patricia held up a document. "The pills are haloperidol, a powerful antipsychotic not prescribed for sleep. And Mr. Sterling's blood work shows trace amounts of arsenic. Not enough to kill him instantly, but enough to mimic the symptoms of dementia over time. Confusion, memory loss, tremors. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. People were looking at Vanessa and Jared as if they were monsters. And they were. "Arsenic," Jared stammered. I didn't know. She gave me the pills." Vanessa slapped him. "Right there in open court." A sharp cracking sound. "Shut up, you idiot," she hissed. Judge Harrison looked like she was about to vault over the bench. Ms. Sterling, control yourself. Patricia stepped forward for the final blow. Your Honor, the motive for this entire charade is simple. It is not love. It is not concern. It is $8 million. She played the final video. The screen showed the living room of my home. It showed Vanessa sipping my scotch, smiling into the camera lens she didn't know was there. The sooner you die in that facility, the better. It will save us the monthly fees. The $8 million is ours, old man. You are just the obstacle we had to remove to get to it. The video ended. The screen went black. For a long moment, nobody moved. The cruelty of her words hung in the air, undeniable and unforgivable. I looked at Vanessa. She had collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands. She knew it was over. There was no spinning this. There was no lie big enough to cover the truth. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I said softly. I built that house with my own hands. I raised my daughter in it. I thought I was building a legacy, but it seems I was building a bank vault that she wanted to rob. Judge Harrison looked at me. Her expression softened, replacing the anger with deep respect. Mr. Sterling, she said, I am vacating the emergency guardianship order effective immediately. You are a free man. Your rights are fully restored. She turned her gaze to Vanessa Jared and Dr. Aris. The fury returned to her eyes. As for the three of you, I am holding you in direct criminal contempt. But that is the least of your worries. She looked at the state troopers. Officers, please take Ms. Sterling, Mr. Grant, and Dr. Aris into custody. I recommend the district attorney look into charges of kidnapping, elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. No, Vanessa screamed as the officer grabbed her wrists. Daddy, Daddy, please tell them it was a mistake. I am your daughter. She looked at me, her eyes wild with desperation. Daddy, help me. They will put me in jail. You cannot let them take me. I watched the handcuffs click around her wrists. I watched the daughter I had adored, the little girl I had protected, from every storm being dragged away by her own greed. I walked over to her. The officer paused, letting me have a final word. Vanessa looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of fear. Daddy, she sobbed. Please. I am family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had left me in the rain. The woman who had drugged me. The woman who had wished for my death. I leaned in close so only she could hear. You are not family, Vanessa, I whispered. You are a bad investment, and I am liquidating my assets. I stepped back. Take her away, I said to the officer. As they dragged her out, screaming and kicking, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. It was Daniel. He was standing there in his cheap hoodie, tears in his eyes. He had watched the whole thing. He had helped me save myself. We did it, Bill, he whispered. I looked at the judge, who was nodding at me. I looked at Patricia, who was closing her laptop with a satisfied snap. Yes, I said, taking a deep breath of the air that suddenly tasted sweet and clean. We did. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more twist to the knife. One more secret I had to reveal to ensure that even if Vanessa ever got out of prison, she would never, ever touch my legacy again. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, before we adjourn, there is one more matter regarding the estate. The judge looked surprised. Yes, Mr. Sterling, the house. I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room where the reporters were frantically typing. My daughter wanted to sell it for $8 million. She thought it was hers to sell. I paused, letting the suspense build, but she forgot to check the deed. Because the house does not belong to me, and it certainly does not belong to her. I reached into the pocket of my hospital gown and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the document I had printed at Daniel's apartment, the one piece of evidence I had kept for the very end. I presented it to the court. Years ago, I placed the entire estate into an irrevocable trust, I announced. And the beneficiary of that trust is not Vanessa Sterling. I looked at the empty door where my daughter had just exited. The beneficiary is the City Veterans Hospital. If I am declared incompetent, or if I die, the house automatically becomes a rehabilitation center for wounded soldiers. A murmur went through the crowd. So even if she had one today, I said, smiling for the first time, even if she had locked me away, she would have inherited nothing but the dirt on her shoes. I looked at Daniel. Let's go home, son, I said. We have a lot of work to do. As the officers began to escort Vanessa and Jared toward the exit, I raised my hand. The movement was slight, but in the silence of the stunned courtroom, it commanded attention. I was not finished. There was one final stone left to unturn, one last secret that would turn their defeat into a complete and total catastrophe. Wait, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. Before you take them away, there is something my daughter needs to hear. Judge Harrison nodded to the bailiffs. They paused, holding Vanessa by the arms near the double doors. She looked back at me, her mascara running down her cheeks, her eyes filled with a mix of hatred and terrified confusion. She thought she had lost the money. She did not realize she had lost much more than that. I picked up the file Patricia had placed on the table. I walked slowly toward the gallery, stopping just a few feet away from where Vanessa stood in handcuffs. You did all of this for the house, I said softly. You drugged me. You humiliated me. You tried to erase my identity. And it was all because you promised Kovac you could sell him the estate for $8 million. Vanessa glared at me, spitting the words out through her tears. It is an inheritance, Dad. It was going to be mine eventually anyway. I just sped up the process. I needed the money now. Kovac already wired the deposit. $500,000. If I don't deliver the deed, he will kill us. I shook my head slowly. The level of her ignorance was almost tragic. That is the problem, Vanessa. You cannot deliver the deed. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not when I die. I opened the file and held up a document stamped with a government seal. It was dated 5 years ago, 2 weeks after the funeral of my wife, Catherine. You were so busy counting my money that you never bothered to check the public records, I said. You assumed that because I lived in the house, I owned the house. But I don't. I turned to the judge, ensuring every word was recorded for posterity. Your Honor, 5 years ago, I was lost in grief. I realized that wealth makes people do terrible things. So to protect my legacy and to honor my late wife, I transferred the title of the Sterling estate, along with all my liquid assets, into an irrevocable trust known as the Catherine Foundation. I looked back at Vanessa. Her face had gone chalk white. She knew what the word irrevocable meant. It meant it could not be changed. Not by me, and certainly not by her. I am not the owner. I continued, my voice steady and cold. I am merely a life tenant. The trust grants me the right to live on the property until my death, provided I remain of sound mind and body. I took a step closer to my daughter. And here's the clause that you should have read before you started this war. The trust stipulates that if the life tenant is declared mentally incapacitated, or if he is forcefully institutionalized for more than 30 days, his right to the property terminates immediately. Vanessa stopped breathing. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It terminates, she whispered. Yes, I said. And do you know who the contingent beneficiary is? I pointed to the pin on my lapel, the one that had recorded her crimes. The property does not go to my next of kin. It transfers 100% to the veterans of foreign wars, to be used as a rehabilitation center for wounded soldiers. I let the words hang in the air. So Vanessa, even if you had succeeded today, even if the judge had banged that gavel, and you had locked me away in Sunrise Meadows, you would have received exactly $0. The moment you declared me insane, you triggered the clause that gave the house away to charity. I watched the math happening behind her eyes. She had taken a $500,000 non-refundable deposit from Kovac, a dangerous man with mob connections. She had promised him a house she did not own. She had committed fraud. And now she had no way to pay him back. You set me up, she gasped, her legs giving way. The officers had to hold her up. I didn't set you up, I said. I set a boundary. You were the one who decided to cross it. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, since the defendant has admitted to accepting a deposit for a property she does not own, I believe the district attorney should add wire fraud and grand larceny to the list of charges. Judge Harrison nodded grimly. So noted, Mr. Sterling. I looked at Vanessa one last time. She was sobbing now, a guttural, ugly sound of total despair. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying because she realized that the walls were closing in from all sides. The law was coming for her freedom, and Kovac would be coming for his money. I turned my back on her. Get them out of my sight, I said. As the doors swung shut behind them, cutting off her wails, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. I looked at the empty courtroom. It was over. The house was safe. My legacy was safe. I walked back to the defense table where Daniel was standing. He looked at me with wide eyes. Did you really give the house away? He asked. I smiled and patted his shoulder. Only if I go crazy, Daniel, and thanks to you, I am feeling saner than I have in years. I picked up my phone, which Patricia had recovered from the evidence bag. I dialed a number. Who are you calling? Patricia asked, packing up her briefcase. I am calling the finest restaurant in the city, I said. I believe I have a birthday dinner to finish. And this time I am bringing the family I chose, not the one I was born with. I looked at Daniel. Go get Lily. You are driving. And Daniel, you might want to start looking for a new apartment. The guest cottage on my estate is empty, and I need someone I can trust to keep an eye on the place. Daniel froze. Tears welled up in his eyes again. Bill, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I said, walking toward the exit into the bright afternoon sun. Just don't let me eat alone. The aftermath of the verdict was swift, brutal, and public. I stood on the marble steps of the courthouse, watching the scene unfold with a strange sense of detachment. It felt like watching a demolition I had ordered. The structure was rotten, and now gravity was doing its work. Vanessa and Jared were not let out the back way. Judge Harrison had denied their request for a private exit. She wanted them to walk the gauntlet. As the double doors swung open, the flashbulbs of the press erupted like a lightning storm. The story of the prominent architect, his greedy socialite daughter, and the miraculous courtroom reversal had leaked to the media within minutes. Vanessa, who had spent her entire life posing for cameras at charity galas, now tried to hide her face behind her cuffed hands. But there was nowhere to hide. The clicking of the shutters was relentless. Reporters shouted questions that cut deeper than any knife. Ms. Sterling, did you really try to sell a house you didn't own? Is it true you drugged your own father? How does it feel to be facing 20 years in prison? She didn't answer. She was sobbing, stumbling in her high heels held upright only by the grip of the bailiff. Jared walked behind her, his head hanging low, looking like a man who was already calculating who he could blame to reduce his sentence. But the real humiliation was yet to come. As they reached the bottom of the steps, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a police car. It was a sleek, expensive town car with tinted windows. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out. I recognized him immediately. He was Kovac's personal attorney. He walked right up to the police line. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked straight at Vanessa. Ms. Sterling, he said, his voice calm and terrifyingly polite. On behalf of Mr. Kovac, consider yourself served. He slapped a thick envelope onto her chest. Since her hands were cuffed, it slid down her dress and fell into the mud at her feet. That is a civil suit for fraud. Breach of contract and theft by deception, the lawyer announced for the cameras. My client is suing for the return of his $500,000 deposit plus $3 million in punitive damages. We are also filing a lien against any and all assets you and your husband currently possess. Vanessa screamed. It was a primal sound of total defeat. She knew what this meant. Even if she somehow avoided prison, she would be destitute. Kovac was not the kind of man who forgave a debt. He would strip her of everything. Her jewelry, her car, her designer clothes, even her future wages. She would spend the rest of her life working to pay off a man who terrified her. The police shoved them into the back of the waiting squad car. I watched through the window as Vanessa pressed her face against the glass, looking at me one last time. Her eyes were pleading. She mouthed the word Dad. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I simply buttoned my coat against the wind and turned around. That woman in the car was not my daughter. My daughter died the day she decided to trade my life for a wire transfer. Later that evening, Patricia called me with an update from the precinct. The alliance between Vanessa and Jared had lasted exactly 45 minutes. As soon as they were placed in separate interrogation rooms, Jared cracked. He sang like a bird. He told the detectives everything. He claimed Vanessa was the mastermind, that she had sourced the arsenic, that she had forged the doctor's signature on the initial intake forms. He gave them the passwords to her laptop. He gave them the text messages. He handed them her head on a silver platter in exchange for a plea deal. It was pathetic. It was predictable. And it sealed their fate. The district attorney announced that he was pursuing maximum sentences: attempted murder, elder abuse, grand larceny, wire fraud, identity theft. The list of charges was so long it took the news anchor 2 minutes to read them all. Vanessa Sterling, the socialite who wanted to live in Paris, was now looking at a future in a 6x8 concrete cell in Stateville Correctional Center. I sat in the quiet of my hotel room listening to the news report. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. The villains were destroyed. But as I turned off the TV, I felt only a profound exhaustion. Justice had been served, but the price had been my family. The phone rang again. It was Daniel. "Bill," he said, his voice sounding nervous. "The movers are here." "Are you sure about this?" And I smiled, the heaviness lifting slightly. "I am sure, Daniel. Move everything in. And make sure you put Lily's crib in the room with the bay window. It gets the best morning light." The villains had fallen, their empire of lies built on sand. But from the rubble I was already starting to build something new, something real. And this time, the foundation would be made of loyalty, not blood. 6 months. That is how long it takes to turn a winter of despair into a spring of hope. The last time I stood in front of the Golden Oak, the rain was washing away my dignity, and I was being shoved into the street like a stray dog. But tonight, the sky was clear. The stars were outshining with a brilliance that felt like a personal welcome. I walked up to the entrance. The heavy wooden doors were held open by a young man in a crisp uniform. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," he said. "Your table is ready. The chef prepared the sea bass exactly how you like it." I smiled back. It was a small thing being greeted by name, but after being treated like a ghost in my own life, it felt like a victory. I walked into the dining room. It was warm, smelling of roasted garlic and expensive wine. I looked toward it, to the podium, where the old manager used to stand, the man who had sneered at me and called security. He was gone. I had fired him 10 minutes after I bought the building. The new manager was a woman named Sarah, a single mother I had met at a job fair. She ran this place with a kindness that made the food taste better. I walked to table 4. The fireplace was crackling. But this time I wasn't eating alone, and I wasn't eating with people who were calculating my death. Sitting there looking uncomfortable in a new navy suit was Daniel, and next to him, sitting on a booster seat and coloring with crayons on the placemat, was Lily. When they saw me, Daniel stood up. He looked different. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. The weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He looked like what he always was, a good man who just needed a chance. "Happy birthday, Bill," he said, shaking my hand. Lily looked up, her face covered in excitement. "Happy birthday," she squealed. "I drew you a picture." She handed me a piece of paper. It was a drawing of a house. A big house with a chimney and 3 stick figures standing in front of it. One was small, one was medium, and one was tall with gray hair. "It is us," she explained, pointing a chubby finger. "Living in the cottage." I felt a lump in my throat that no amount of water could wash away. This drawing was worth more than the $15 million estate sitting on the hill. We sat down. We ate. We laughed. For the first time in years, I didn't have to watch what I said. I didn't have to worry that my words would be twisted or my kindness exploited. Halfway through the dessert, I reached under my chair and pulled out a leather portfolio. Daniel froze. He still had a reflex of fear whenever he saw legal documents. "Relax," I said, sliding it across the table. "It is not a lawsuit." Daniel opened it. He read the first page. Then he read it again. His hands started to shake, rattling the paper. "Bill," he whispered, Is this real?" "It is an adult adoption petition," I said, my voice steady. "My lawyer Patricia filed it this morning." I looked at him, forcing him to meet my gaze. "My biological children tried to erase me, Daniel. They wanted my money, but they didn't want a father. You saved my life when you had nothing. You gave me a home when you were about to lose yours." I reached out and covered his hand with mine. "The law says you are an adult, so I cannot raise you. But the law also says I can choose my heir. I want you to be my son, Daniel, legally, officially. I want Lily to be my granddaughter. I want to ensure that no matter what happens to me, nobody can ever take that cottage away from you again." Daniel dropped his head. His shoulders shook. He was crying silent tears of relief and gratitude. I don't know what to say," he choked out. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "You just have to sign." He looked at Lily, who was happily eating chocolate cake, oblivious to the fact that her future had just been secured forever. She would go to college. She would travel. She would never know the hunger her father had known. "Thank you, Dad," Daniel whispered. Hearing that word spoken with truth and love healed the last wound in my heart. We finished our meal as a family. As we walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air felt refreshing. I looked back at the window where I had once stood in the rain, watching a celebration that excluded me. That timeline was gone. This was my reality now. I looked at the camera breaking the fourth wall, speaking directly to the millions of people who had followed my journey from the depths of betrayal to this moment of peace. People say that blood is thicker than water. They say family is everything. But on that rainy night 6 months ago, I learned the truth. Family is not determined by whose DNA you share. It is not determined by a last name or a birth certificate. Family are the people who hold your hand when the rest of the world turns its back. Family are the people who whisper the truth to you when everyone else is shouting lies. Vanessa and Jared had my blood, but they were strangers. Daniel was a stranger, but he had my heart. So if you are watching this and you feel alone or betrayed by the people who are supposed to love you, remember this: it is never too late to find your real family. Sometimes they are waiting for you in the most unexpected places. Sometimes they are just a whisper away in the rain. My name is William Sterling. I lost a fortune, but I found a son. And that is a trade I would make 1,000 times over. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had a stranger show you more kindness than your own kin, tell me about it in the comments below. And please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share these stories with the people who need to hear them the most. Until next time, take care of each other.